Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 32. How's everybody doing tonight?
Hopefully everyone is not completely stressed out and anxious about
It's
everything.
it's been a long week.
Right. It's been a long 3 weeks.
We just definitely wanted to start off by saying thanks for all of you who joined on our first Instagram live sesh, which was exciting and something to look forward to on election day to kind of distract from everything that was going on. We were kind of like worried, would we have enough to say for an hour? It turns out we do.
We always have enough to say. We always have too much to say. The funny thing is we did have some technical problems. We started out with the camera facing the wrong way and
Just for like a second or
we
so.
had trouble setting it up right, and there were a few problems like
Our
that.
technical staff did not show up, so
Right.
we were on our own.
And we were narrow. We had the
Yeah,
narrow.
we have to figure out how to do it so it's this view, but on live, so we're not like sideways. So it's a work in progress.
But we had fun.
We
had
did.
adult beverages and we
Yeah,
didn't.
we're not gonna have drinks every time.
Well, no, although I just didn't think about it this time. We probably should have.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I think it worked out okay.
I think
We
so too.
figured it out in the end, and it was nice to have comments while we were going.
Yeah, and just like getting to know what states people were from, and just all the people that joined, especially our daughter, which was very nice, in
That's true.
college.
Yeah.
And she said she watched it with her friends. So thanks, Claire.
So either she's not embarrassed by us or she sat around with her friends and made fun of us. One way or the other. We're not really sure.
No, I'm pretty sure she said my parents are really cool.
Yeah, that's
probably what
likely
it
to be
is.
the case.
That's what I'll take it as.
That's a good call. So we were just talking
Mm-hmm.
beforehand about how, it's been a stressful week, a stressful few days, and, things are still up in the air as far as the election goes. And we promise we won't talk about, partisan politics, but
Right.
just trying to kind of figure out how people have been managing the stress, if they've been managing the stress.
Tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. I think we've done a pretty good job of sticking to a regular routine. Although we were up way too late on Tuesday night.
Yeah, that happens.
Well, and it's funny because we didn't actually watch the returns.
We did
just
not.
but we figured, we should be at least connected enough to know if there was some news.
Yeah, if there's anything breaking, we
So
would have
we-
been up and ready for it.
I had the computer on, and we briefly checked. I don't know. I think it was after midnight Central Time. We checked,
Like the
and
big broadcast.
yeah, I think it was NBC or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely NBC because I think Chuck Todd was in it. But in any event, it was like, they didn't know what the heck was going on. So they didn't know any more than we could find out
Yeah.
from looking on, social media or
refresh,
whatever.
refresh.
So we skipped it. I think we ended up staying up till sometime between 1 and 1:30.
Yeah.
Which is not,
On a weeknight, it's a little bit late.
and we didn't obviously find out what was happening.
No.
So, but just trying to manage. I mean, I'll be honest. I've sort of had one eye on the computer, for the past 2 days, just kind of checking to see what was going on while I was trying to get work done and everything like that. And I find that to be very stressful.
Yeah, definitely. I saw somebody said that was so funny. It was like, it was snowing last week. It's 70 degrees now. We don't know what the election results are. People are putting up Christmas trees and Christmas
Right.
music. It's like all these things all wrapped in a bow. And it's just like, it's a lot for some people to handle.
I was thinking about that earlier, and it's not really related to the election, but just sort of the general state of stress that people are in. Partly, I guess, because of the election. But I wonder if this may not have been the best year for advertisers to start the Christmas ads basically before Halloween.
Yeah.
Because not everybody enjoys that. And I thought maybe when we're all trapped in our houses and we're stuck in front of televisions and computer screens, maybe they could have just held off for a little
Just a
bit.
tad.
On the other hand, I know a lot of, retail businesses are worried and that's their biggest time of year.
Yeah,
So I
so
guess that's the rationale. But it's, I have a hunch that maybe created more stress for some people.
Yeah, especially because for so many people who are out of work, reduced
Well, there's
hours,
that,
furloughed.
right,
It's
right.
not like it's a happy time or regular holiday season for many people. So that is also another cause of stress. If you're in that
Yeah.
boat, it's like, well, I can't do anything, kind of thing. So that's not fun. But yeah, we are definitely hanging in there. Hope you guys are too.
We have not really. It's funny because on the one hand, I have sort of kept my eye on the computer just to see if there's any news, but on the other hand, we haven't really been watching like network news
No.
broadcasts.
For a couple weeks.
Well, right, and especially the past few days, because if you know that there's no actual developments, I find, and everybody's different, but I find it stressful just to listen to people talk about how we don't know what's going on yet.
Right.
I mean, we know the things we know are that there are a handful of states where the results are very close and they're still counting the ballots. That's all we know at this point. All the rest of it, all the projections, and well, there's this county and there's that county, and this is what happened in 2016, and this is what, I mean, I'm sure there are people who find that really interesting and fascinating, but to me, it just seems to kind of like, first of all, I don't follow it closely enough to know whether they're saying things that make sense, but ultimately, it doesn't really tell you.
And like you reminded me, and not like this is new to this election because obviously it's super close, but every state does their
Right.
elections differently. So you could be in a state where they will accept a mail-in ballot several days later if it's postmarked that day. That counts, kind
Right.
of thing. So you can't just say,
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing is that this situation seems to be out of the ordinary, and I think it's just because there's a lot more sort of emotion and anxiety focused on this election than there typically has been in the past.
Right.
And a lot of that, I think, just has to do with all these different circumstances coming together at the same time: the pandemic, people being sort of locked down, people being out of work, or having friends and family who are affected by COVID and all that. It just adds this sort of extraordinary layer of stress. And we're not used to having an election in the middle of a pandemic. Unless you're more than 100 years old,
Yeah,
you've
which-
never experienced that before.
that's true.
So that adds a lot to it. But I mean, I just think, just to try to be an objective lawyer for a moment, if there is such a thing, really the circumstances are of the actual, counting of ballots are really not that unusual. We're used to the idea that on election night, the networks call different states or call the election as a whole. And usually that's it. I mean, they usually have a pretty clear idea who won what states and who won enough states to win the electoral
safe.
college, and the campaigns are typically following the exact same information that the networks are. So when the networks look at a state and they figure that, X percent of the votes have been counted, and here are the results so far, and here's what's left, and they have a pretty good idea that the candidate who's trailing is not going to be able to catch up. So they
Right.
call that state. The candidates are looking at the same thing. So there's sort of a consensus. So when they say that, Barack Obama won or that George W. Bush, well, that one did go up in the air. But in 2004, they called it for George W. Bush. Everybody's sort of looking at the same information. They all kind of agree. This is a more challenging situation only because there are some critical states where the results are very close. There was a lot more mail-in voting this year because of the pandemic.
Yep.
But in and of itself, that's not that unusual. No state fully completes the count of votes on election day, and the wrinkle here is that in certain states, including some of the states that were very close, it couldn't have been determined on election day, like Michigan, by law, the election officials were not allowed to count mail-in votes until the polls closed. And the idea there is they don't want reports coming in that one candidate or the other is ahead before the actual election day. They want all that information to come out, kind of at the same time. Because that could
I guess I never
influence
thought
the
about
votes
that.
of
Yeah,
people.
because some people would be like, well,
Right.
I'm not going to go vote.
Right.
Gotcha.
And I mean,
That makes sense.
in 1980, the networks called the election for Ronald Reagan while polls were still open on the West Coast. And so, that they got a lot of criticism for that. So in any event, so in some states, the law is that they could not count mail-in and absentee ballots until the polls close election night. So it's not really that extraordinary of a thing that the
They're not gonna
counting
know.
continued until the next day and the day after that. So that's one thing to bear in mind. The other thing is that, because of the Electoral College, states run their own elections. There's no federal standards for how they do these things, because all the Constitution says is, number one, the president is picked by the Electoral College, and number two, the states determine how their electors are picked, right? So it's a matter of state law how they run elections and how they determine where the polling places are, and how, whether you can vote by mail, whether you can vote absentee, whether you can vote early, where you can vote early. All those things are governed by state law. And so that's why we're kind of in this situation where there's 50 different sets of rules, actually more than that, because there's the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and everything. But there are all these different sets of rules for how elections are conducted.
And it's complicated.
And, so I probably doesn't help people to necessarily calm down about it, but it's really not that unusual.
And I think now, because of technology and because people want answers right away to anything, you can Google a question in 2 seconds, you can find out information and get things very fast. I think that's also the mentality of like, well, how come we can't figure this out faster?
And I think a lot of people or a lot of people sort of assume, maybe incorrectly, that when in the typical election, when at 11:30 at night or something like that, the networks all say Barack Obama won, or George Bush won, or whoever won. They think that means that there are some sort of like certified final results that have come in from the states, so we know for a fact. But again, those are always based on projections. We don't know. The states don't actually have to submit certified results until I think it's 5 weeks after the election.
And it's probably not obviously any time where they've done that, and then 5 weeks later, be like, oh no, I'm sorry, you lost.
Right, and there are always ballots that come in late because, for example, the military ballots almost never arrive by the day of the election because they're voting absentee. Even if they're stationed at home, they're it's rare that you'd be stationed in your home state unless you're a career military person who's finally settled down in a particular location and now you're a resident of that state, right? But if you're in Germany or Korea or something like that, you're voting absentee. So those ballots always trickle in late. It's just that in most years, we have enough of an idea who's going to win each given state that you can call it that night, but those aren't official results. So it's really just not that unusual to be in a situation where we're still counting votes after election day.
I still hope that maybe by the end of tonight we'll know.
Well, and then that's the other thing we should probably just touch on is like, okay, so what happens next? Let's say that we get a definitive, it's not really definitive, but let's say we know enough to say, or the campaigns know enough to say that one or the other candidate has won enough states that they've reached 270 electoral votes. Although there is a possibility that it could be 269 and 269.
Oh, gosh.
Well, that's because Nebraska, at least, splits its electoral votes. Well, I don't know if that's the only reason. I suppose there's other ways mathematically that could happen. But Nebraska doesn't allocate all of its electoral votes to the winner of it's not winner takes all. That's what I'm trying to say. They do it proportionally. So the Omaha region sometimes will go for the Democrat while the rest of the state will go for the Republican. So the Democrat will get one electoral vote from Nebraska. That happened with Barack Obama. That's happening with, it seems to be happening with Joe Biden. But what I was going to say is, so there's, once the results are more or less in, then there's other possibilities. There can be recounts. There can be legal challenges to the recounts. One thing I think that is important to remember is that what happened in 2000 was not that the Gore campaign challenged the results in court. They had a right under Florida law to ask for a recount, which they did. And then the Bush campaign came in and said they wanted to stop it because they were unhappy with the way it was being carried out. That was a very unique situation, and the decision itself was very unique. But one thing that I think, one good lesson from that case, or that scenario, is that the Supreme Court did say, at a certain point, you have to certify the results. And so there is a finality to this process.
Right, it just
It
can't
can't
go
go
on
on
till-
forever, right?
Spring. Thank goodness.
So I mean, who knows what'll happen? There may be legal challenges, but if let's say, for the sake of argument, that Joe Biden wins enough electoral votes, in that case, it would be the Trump campaign either asking for a recount or maybe challenging the results because they think there's something wrong with the way they were counted or something like that.
Right.
But so it would be a different scenario than what you saw in 2000. So I don't know if that makes a huge difference in terms of how it ends up, but that's something to think about.
And we're just kind of like trying to stay calm and,
yeah.
just kind of keep ourselves distracted from it all. And there's really nothing we can do about it now anyway. We did our part by voting, which is the most important thing. And
hopefully you did too.
yes. And I always remember my dad always said, like, people in other countries can't vote or stand in line for hours and hours and hours. And if you can, you have to vote. So
Yep.
I've always kept that close to heart because you got to do that.
And whatever happens will happen.
Yeah, we'll
That's
still get through it,
yeah.
and Thanksgiving and Christmas will still happen, all that stuff. So yeah, we just wanted to see how you guys were doing and chime in the comments and let us know how you're faring with all this in the week. And thank God it's Friday tomorrow.
Yeah,
That's all I
really.
can say.
We all need it.
And actually in Chicago, it's going to be warm this weekend. So we've got another kind of summer, well, not almost summer, like 70. So that's nice. But we'll see you guys next time for episode 33. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.